Well, today's guests, we have a trifecta of racing knowledge and technology. I'm going to get in trouble for this, but they represent over 15 decades in the racing business. We'll do the math in a minute. There are also three people that have given back to the future of racing in a bunch of ways. They are Dan Elliot, Gary Grimes, and Warren Johnson. Dan from the Elliot Racing team and Winston Cup champion, 1988, I believe. Gary Grimes is a highly awarded engine builder. And the cool thing about Gary is he's been from drag racing to circle track and probably go-karts and everything in between. And he's from Cumming, Georgia. Warren Johnson, six-time NHRA Pro Stock Racer champion. And if I'm not mistaken, that was NHRA. He had a couple other championships in IHRA. And so I hope I wasn't too dramatic about the decades thing, but welcome to Buds Garage Overdrive, the podcast.
Glad to be here.
Can I start out by saying thank you, Bud, for assembling. I'm telling you, this it brings chills to me thinking of the history that's here, the knowledge that is here, and I look up to both of you as far as what I've come through for what you've done in your careers and what you're still doing. And that's the incredible part. And I thank Bud for assembling this and bringing, especially me being here. Thank you so much. But just the experience, the knowledge, the history here is incredible.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking forward to hearing all of this because I'm honored to be here. I really am.
Well, I was just about to say that I am honored to be here. I pestered the heck out of all of you to get you here. And I wanted to thank all of you for what you've given me as far as knowledge, because I didn't teach because I didn't know how to do things. I taught because I wanted to learn things and pass it on. I was a automotive tech in a dealership, and I ran a engine machine shop. And I'm envious of people like Warren that can just grab a hold of a Bridgeport and make something, because I can bore a block, but that's, you don't do too many of that with, in your home garage. But I'm just happy to be around you all. I'm happy to be anywhere at this point in my life, but we all are. And, I just appreciate everything you've done. Warren, you've had some guys go on to win, that work for you as interns. They've gone on to win championships in IMSA racing. One's got his own business. One runs a big truck shop in Alabama now. And, Gary, I call you with some of the dumbest questions. You always got an answer. And Dan was silly enough to come and teach. and teach kids about transmissions and stuff. And it's your nickname, Warren, is the professor. I don't know who gave you that moniker. I know why, but I don't know who actually gave you that. But I've seen you on the scientific side of things, but I've seen you take people under your wing that were really interested and, take an interest in them, you and Arlene and Kurt, and they went on to do good things.
Well, when we hired people, I always looked at it two ways, attitude or aptitude. If we got somebody they got the greatest aptitude, they know everything about everything. So as far as an employee, I always tell them, we're going to do it my way until you can prove that there's a better way, and I'm all ears then. But if you got a good attitude and you're willing to learn, you can be successful in any venture in life, because there's always people that have learned more than you because they've been around longer, or smarter, or whatever, or more interested in the particular venue that you're working at. So we had some good employees through the company over the years.
Yeah, and it's a special thing when you take your knowledge and transfer it to somebody else, because like you say, you can't know everything. And sometimes they come back with some interesting ideas, and you can add it to what your knowledge already is. So it's good stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You do. There's no one person knows everything. Everybody knows a little bit about something, and it's just a matter of gathering all that information and putting it to good use. That's
Dan, you taught some of these kids face to face. What was your feelings about where we were headed with, not only the racing, but the generational changes that are going on and the direction that these these kids were on as far as finding a way.
You know, that to me it's what's interesting. It's what Warren was saying about the attitude. The attitude is really, to me, a lot what it's all about, because if you're willing to, not willing, but if you go above and beyond on learning something, and you can see the desire, you can see the passion, and you know that these kids are going to go somewhere and they're really interested in learning. They listen to you, and you also, you think you're pouring into them, but also too, in some ways, a lot of them pour into you, because you learn so much, because you think that, well, I've done this for so long, this is the way you do this, or this is the way it's done. And a lot of times those you're teaching to will teach you different ways to go at a problem, different ways to look at things. And I think about the things that I've learned in my lifetime and the things I've been taught in my lifetime. And I thought I knew a lot about a lot of different things, but the more I learn, the more I know that I don't know as much as I thought I knew. And I'm really open to a lot of things, because the thing that hurt us the worst in racing was from the beginning, and this is what Ernie always preached, is that with technology, with all the things that are coming daily, the changes that occur daily, that you think that because somebody else did this or that it can't be done. But technology is changing that train of thought, and always has, because there are new ways of doing things. And the thing that defeated us was what made us, was the fact that we quit looking at this objectively, that we got set in our own ways. We got to doing things a certain way. We got set in that, and we didn't change. We didn't keep up with change, and change is inevitable.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that's really what got you where you're at. It's what defeated you, and that to us, because in the last was the fact that when they came with restrictor plates, and I'm interested in a lot about what Gary and Warren have done as well, in because I brought a little piece of technology, but the restrictor plates, in the end there, it was costing us about $100,000 for every horsepower gain in R&D, and you know it as well as I do. But the technology, and you never quit learning.
No, absolutely. No. Gary, you grew up in the machine shop.
I did.
You know, you grew up around your dad's racing, the Twister engines, the Dixie Twister, all of that history. What if you, through that, when did you decide that you wanted to stay in the direction that you're in the machine shop, and carry that on into now?
Well, there's one thing, and again, I get to only speak of my experience here. I was basically born into it. Mm-hmm. I was so blessed to have my father, Hoyt Grimes. From the time I can remember, there was at least a machine shop in the backyard, and my earliest part of my life was my father's heydays, and so he was a tremendous inspiration to me. So I had that going on my whole life, and the question comes up of when did I see the point of where I wanted to do this for a living. I don't remember a time when I didn't.
Okay.
I was surrounded by great people such as I have sitting on both sides of me here, and I can't say enough about that on several levels. But there again, you have your own ideas, your own aspirations in life, but there has to be like-minded people, for lack of a better term, and I had the greatest in the world around me, whether it was family, whether it was friends, I had them. And in my later years, when, let's say for lack of a better term, I got more serious about what I was doing on my aspect of it, not to take anything off what Dad had done in his lifetime, but in my lifetime, I can't say enough about the people that are around me, the engine builders, the drivers that were around me constantly in my world until I became a racer driver, quote, engine builder of some status, whether it's in my mind or someone else's. It's just hard to explain. Being able to talk to to people of that time that were my heroes. And I never could say anything when I don't bring my dad. My dad was so easy to be around, work around, talk to, and the people he surrounded himself, and I won't bring a lot of them up, but y'all know who they are, and a lot of them are in the Hall of Fames and whatnot. And the gentleman sitting to my left here, even before he came to the southeastern area, he'd always accept my phone calls. And I talked to him because I had such high respect for him and all. And, that was pretty well what brought me into it and got me going. But I can't say enough about the friends, and don't ever underestimate family.
Correct.
That allowed us to come to this point in time. Now, obviously, my professional career, as far as driving and whatnot, ended many years ago. This gentleman here, I've never not known what he was doing, and I've always been so impressed about so much, and I won't elaborate on that because I'll let him do that, but I'll wave the flag. And this family here was always up the road from me, and, it wasn't just my whole life was involved in drag racing. It's just from the day I was born, if there was such thing as having little things hanging around, if I did have such hanging above my bed as a little child, they would have been all dragsters.
Yeah, there you go.
Kind of a weird situation, but
so
that's pretty well mine.
as we sit here today, what are you doing now, Warren, on a daily basis? Now that you haven't stepped away from racing, but what are you doing on a daily basis in your shop?
We do a lot of machine work for other companies. Plus, I continue to develop the fuel-injected 500 cubic inch engines. We do some sporty car road race engines, so it keeps us busy. Now that I got the time to really work on the engines I raced when I was racing, it's amazing what you can do when you break it down. Everybody asks me all the time, "Oh, how fast can these cars go?" And I always tell them it breaks down to two aspects: mind and material. And that's when Dan was talking about the materials and technology. It's absolutely true. You have to keep your thumb on the pulse of technology, on a hourly basis in some cases, and because that's where the gains are. Now you have to have the mind to accept, okay, this material, it can do this, that, and whatnot. So you have to look at everything that's out there and keep an open mind. And in a lot of cases, you have to find people that are educated in certain areas and, garner their knowledge. And that's the only way you make progress.
Gary, what's a day in Grimes Engine Shop look like nowadays?
Well, obviously, I've been practicing retirement for 2 years.
How's that going?
It's not doing well. I'm not sure which side of this practicing, because I look at it as a 50% thing. I'm not sure at this point in time what's winning out. My problem is that I have the same problem as the other gentleman guy. First of all, you have acquaintances, customers are out there, which probably will be with us the rest of our lives. And there again, that's what I spoke about earlier. That's friends, family, acquaintances that still want a certain product of the level that you've been accustomed to doing. And so they're always out there. Well, that keeps me involved, or at least my excuse to stay involved. I still get to do a little R&D work, nothing like what we did in the past. But right now I'm just trying to relax, back away from it, and help my son, which has started his own business. And so that's it. But I am practicing retirement, and I'm hoping to get better with it. Hoping maybe one of you guys can help me out with that. But I'm practicing, sir.
Warren's going to be no help. I'll be no help. Well, I just can't stop.
I've been after him for probably 20 years with this joke when we're on the phone, somewhat pertaining to that, and he keeps responding the same way. So, I agree with you. Warren's been a tremendous help, a good friend and all, but I don't think either one of these guys is going to help me out with this retirement deal.
He keeps mentioning this pine box thing. Yeah.
I can't even spell retirement. I don't understand it.
That's all right. I can't spell professor. One day I was an instructor. The next day we became a college, and I was professor. And I'm thinking, how many F's are in professor? Dan,
one of my dad's favorite sayings: "I'd rather wear out than rust."
Rust out. That's right.
And I think that my retirement be the same as his, toes up. I love what I do. I love to tinker. I love to find new ways to do things. I find I've got friends. I talked to Fred Hawkins. He said to
Yes.
tell you hello. I
you.
talked to Greg Brown. He said to tell you hello, and he's going to come back down here. And these people are instrumental in my life because through Greg and the company he works with, he's kept me up to speed on a lot of things. He didn't tell me any of your secrets on what y'all were working on together, but Greg works for a company that's very instrumental in doing a lot of technology, a lot of things that I learn on what's new, what's coming, metals and so forth. And through Fred, Gary did engines for him when his son was racing, and that's the thing I find the most interesting in what we've done is the relationships. It's not just I've learned over the years, and it was a very costly and valuable lesson, is that I don't discount anyone anymore. I used to, as I grew up, I watched this through friends and family where you use people to get different things, but now it's relationships. And the relationships have become so valuable to me because it's through the years I can go back and honestly the good friends are the relationships that I've built, and that's what I miss the most of not being on the road and not traveling as much, because those relationships turned into such great friendships.
And you're running a gear shop.
And I'm running a gear shop.
Gears, yeah.
And I've done in my lifetime, because we all come from such differing backgrounds, but I'd love to talk to Warren sometime about the different transmissions and the evolution of some of that stuff. And I know this is not the time, but even in Gary, I look at Gary because we were relegated to the small blocks. NASCAR kind of put that on us in the early 70s. And y'all are bigger inch, and I love that big inch stuff. But we've always been kind of relegated to what we've had to work with. We kind of in a small box here. But this stuff has just evolved, and through my stuff, I've done the transmission gear stuff, and that's how George Fleury and George did a lot of the drag racing stuff, and I've learned so much from him, and still talk to him, still talk to Stuart Hamilton, which Stu is on up in years, but most of my friendship relationships, the problem is we're aging out, and a lot of my friends have retired or they've passed away, and acquiring the friendships is tougher to do now because you don't talk to people much anymore. It's hard to get to talk to people. You find it difficult to get in to do that. But I've done, as far as the gear stuff, transmission stuff, I can't begin to tell you. I would say between 3,000 and 4,000 9-inch gears and 3,000 to 4,000 transmissions, whether it be Muncie's or even down to the G-Force stuff, because we race the G-Force stuff and the Ford top loaders. And there is so much about that. Each time I say I've seen everything, I'll say I've seen everything, and something will come along that absolutely just blows my mind.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd seen everything, but I keep learning every day. But it's amazing how all of this has to fit together, function together to make a complete unit, because without the engines and the transmissions and all the technology, but it all equates to one thing. You're learning, you're evolving, you're refining your product
Constantly.
daily.
Warren, when you grew up in Virginia, Minnesota.
Born in Virginia, Iron Range, right?
Yeah, I had to read that several times. I didn't know there was a Virginia, Minnesota. But you grew up on the farm. You know, if you grew up on the farm, you got to fix stuff. And you were fixing a lot of stuff, learning how to weld, self-taught, and all of those things. When and where did you decide to get in, and why did you decide to get into racing? Was your dad a racer or anything?
Oh, no, I was listening to Gary about his dad and their relationship. My dad came through the Depression.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He absolutely could not understand people racing cars. He called it vehicle abuse. Mm-hmm. He would never even never went to a race in his life.
Wow.
So I was had to learn to repair everything on the farm by, just by trial and error, basically. And that's where I got, the interest in the mechanical side of everything. And it just kind of went from there. In fact, we had some pretty good law enforcement up there. The local sheriffs would block a section of highway off, and we could race
Oh, really?
for a whole Sunday. So that's where I got kind of interested in it. And I could see, okay, racing, you got to make these engines better. They got to be efficient, this, that, whatnot. And it kind of just blossomed from there.
What was your first race car?
Oh, actually, it was a 48 Chevrolet, and I traded it for a 49 because it was 200 pounds lighter because they had 6-cylinder engines in them. And he had that was in like 1957, 58, somewhere around there. And I remember they had the fuel-injected Chevys and supercharged 312 Fords. And I figured, there's got to be a way to beat these guys. So I got an engine out of an old school bus, a 302 GMC, boarded at the 331. It was pretty good. And then I started looking at, okay, I've got to make more power with it. Well, it's air and fuel. Air, oxygen, fuel. So I put oxygen injection on it. Built the whole system. And I was like 14 years old.
Wow.
And I wiped up them Chevys and Fords like they were standing still. To Dan's experience, had an old Chevrolet 3-speed in it. It just cleaned the cluster gears right off of it.
Yeah, I would think so.
So I found a Packard transmission in the junkyard. Man, I looked at them gears. This is all me. But that was before the Hirsch shifters. So I took that was a top loader. I took the shifter off, I think it was a 39 Ford transmission. Redid all the sliders on the thing and had one stick sticking out of there. That thing shifted like a dream.
Wow.
You
And
just
Packard being a big, heavy car was strong enough
Oh
for
yeah,
what you
it
were
was
doing.
definitely strong enough.
Yeah.
But that's where you learn. I mean,
Gary, when did you jump in the seat?
Well, I had some adventures myself on the street. Some of them's well documented. But there again, most of the cars that I was around at the time, basically were the dragsters at the time. And we had some hoodlums that were around the house and whatnot there. People like Hubert Platt and Phil Bonner. Yeah, people no one would know anything about. And I got a little interested in what they were doing with the full-bodied cars, and I paid attention to it. Well, shortly after that, I got involved with some street stuff. I was a full 16 years old by then,
Oh, you knew everything.
Oh, yeah, Remember, I was 16 before I'll admit to anything to do with on the street. So I want to make sure that was clear.
So we've got a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old
We
street
won't talk
racing
about
good.
those days because I'm sure I did everything my parents told me to do.
Oh yeah.
So I had a lot of learning experience with components that would and wouldn't work with some substandard vehicles at the time. Got to know the junkyard people well. In a little later years of my life, my father got in the salvage yard business, and that never hurt.
Yeah. Can't run off parts.
What can I say about that? So anyhow, due to pilfering and other things, for lack of a better term, we got things up and operational. But honestly, a lot of things that transpired in the street world of street racing at that point in time. Now, granted, you had a lot of what I thought highly of racers around me and all. And like I mentioned before, I was around some pretty neat people at the time, and I was definitely listening to what was being said about what's going on the racetrack. I think I learned a whole lot before I actually started racing on a racetrack from things I learned that went on political and otherwise on street racing at the time. And plus, I got to spend a lot of track time / street time that taught me a lot about automobiles and all. So by the time I became of age, 16, where I actually got to go up and down drag strips, and the first of what was my race cars It was pretty well a lot of that. My first time down the racetrack in a car was just some modified street cars. They'd fly. They'd run high 11s.
Yeah.
On those big 7-inch wide tires that were more dangerous than anything in the world at the time.
Dan, you grew up in the dealership, the building supply, being around your dad. How did the racing thing happen to the Elliot family?
It's
We know you were running up and down the streets in Dawsonville. I've already heard about that.
it from the sound of it, it sounds like that we all had influence from fathers that loved. Daddy loved racing, and there was a lot of moonshining obviously going on in the hills, and everybody was trying to modify the street cars to go faster so they could outrun the revenuers. And unlike Warren, the policemen in our town, they were happy to lock you up, and if you were lucky enough, they notified your parents were going to come kill you as well. So that is really what got us involved, because we all three, Ernie, myself, and Bill, we all drove. We all had turns driving, but it stuck with Bill, and Ernie loved doing the motor part, and I loved doing which I helped Ernie with the motor part before. A lot of people don't know this. I helped Ernie with the motor part long before I got into the trans and gear stuff. The trans and gear stuff was kind of a fluke. We had the building supply before we had the Ford dealership, and Daddy would take us to Home and Moody when we were kids, and we'd go up there, and Daddy would buy as they would do the cars. Don't know how they did the drag racing, but the NASCAR cars, they would take a car off the assembly line and basically pull the motor trans out of it and do the modifications. And the motor and trans they pulled out, it would go over to the corner with all the other stuff they did not use. So you could go up there at the time, and the first trip I went up there was probably in the mid-'60s, and Daddy had already been going, and he was buying the engines they were taking out of the production cars, which the first engines he bought was the Tri-Power 406s, which to me was probably the best motor that Ford ever produced. That was a great engine. I feel that it was better than the 427. It was just the combination of bore stroke stuff made it just the perfect motor. So, and the Tri-Power just added to it, and we're putting them in our trucks for the building supply. So we had the fastest deliveries of anybody in the area. But Daddy realized at a young age that he had created his own problem, because we were terrorizing the road with everything that we could get our hands on as well. And Daddy made it easy, because, as Gary said, with him having cars sitting around, and with the advent of the Ford Place and the junk cars and the trade-ins and stuff, and those all got used for field racing activities. So we all had our heroes that we were trying to imitate, and we were doing a great job of destroying most of the cars he was trading in. So he said, we got to get y'all boys into an activity that you can, if you're going to kill yourself, fine, but we're not going to kill all the people on the road in the process. So that's how we evolved into racing. But Daddy loved racing. Going back, he loved racing, and I remember playing in the race cars when I was a little kid, because Daddy's hero at the time, Gober Sosby, a lot of the people from the area he grew up with, they all had fast cars. And it was more street stuff. It was more street racing, because I did more drag racing. I loved to. I had a small block in a Mustang, because Buddy Jensen. Did y'all ever do anything with Buddy Jensen?
Knew him well.
Okay, so he did a street port. He did a cylinder head for me. It was a street port, and I paid a whopping $100 to have a pair of heads street ported.
A pair.
You got a deal. It was $125 to me.
It was $100 to get I talked him into $100 for a street port, and this was. I'd raced everything around the area in the early 70s, and even got to the point that the sheriff come visited and said this is going to stop. So anyway, that's when Daddy said, y'all got to do something different. So the stories like this, as much as you think that you're making all this stuff up, you and I both know that this stuff was real. And I did more racing on the street. It was kind of like flying. I did more flying without a license than I did when I got my license to fly. So you could get by with it. And nowadays, it's impossible.
Now they make TV shows about it, and it's like it's the newest, latest great thing, street racing and all these corny shows that are on. Warren, when did you decide? You're all street racing, to some level. And the cool thing about drag racing is everybody that's driven a car is drag raced. Even if it's just from a stoplight to a stoplight, we can't help ourselves. But when did you decide, Warren, that, my God, I can make a living at this?
That's really hard to pinpoint that.
And you were married at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Still are. Yeah.
I probably decided about 1972 or 73 that I can make a living at this because there was enough avenues outside of Minnesota, especially because you got 9 months of winter up there and 3 months of tough sledding. We'd race AHRA. IHRA wasn't in existence back then, but then there was UDRA, NHRA, a lot of open independent races and whatnot. So we could race anywhere from once a week to as many as 5 times a week.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So I started looking at that, everybody puts their pants on the same way. I don't think there's anybody I can't be competitive with out there. And I was looking at Jenkins and Nicholson and all them guys that are out there. And everybody always asks, did you have a hero out there? I said, no, because if you got a hero that you're trying to emulate, you got to take their bad qualities too. Mm-hmm. So that's just excess baggage. So I can make my own mistakes and learn from that a lot faster. And that's when I decided to turn racing into a business. It's never been nothing but a business to me.
Right.
End of the year, if that bottom line ain't black, I'm done. And I managed to do it for 40 years that way. And it was just to me, a way of making a living. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it because I got to do the development work, trying to figure out how to use the same ingredients, kind of like a great chef. Everybody got the same ingredients who comes up with the best product. And that's what the real fascination for me was, the driving part of it. I just got kind of stuck with that. Arlene didn't want to drive. Kurt was too young, and the dog couldn't get a license, so I was stuck with it.
You just wanted to make it better, whatever it was.
That's it. Just worked at it, and that's where we came up with a lot of safety features. Dual parachutes was some of my stuff. Funny car cage. A lot of that stuff in the effort of driver safety came from what we did.
Yeah, instead of using the showroom stuff that everybody was running. Eventually,
point seat belts.
Yep.
In fact, it took NHRA 9 or 10 years to figure out about the dual shoulder harness deal instead of a single tie in the middle. And it was just kind of interesting that the parachute deal was kind of ironic. People are having parachute failures and consequently getting on the brakes too hard and crashing. So I was working with Bob Stroud at the time, and I told Bob, we're going to put 2 parachutes on this car. He said, well, how much stopping power do you need? I said, 2.5 G's negative would be fine. So I put on, I'm looking at him, man, he's got bleed panels in them, but these sure look big. We put them on there. We're testing down in Bradenton, Florida. I hit the chutes on that the first time. If I didn't have the shoulder belts on, I would have eaten the steering wheel and the windshield. I called, what the heck did you do? Well, he said 2.5. Yeah, I had 5, so that was each.
2.5 each.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
When you get hit with 5 G's of negative, I mean, you feel that.
Wow, that's almost space shuttle launch.
That's
when you go
stick
negative,
your eyeballs to the windshield.
Yeah, I mean, these things launch at 3.2 G, so you get kind of used to that. But the negative thing, I mean, you could tear out retinas and whatnot.
Right. Dan, you were involved in some safety issues and improvements through the years. The biggest one I can think of is pit road speed.
Yeah, that was the stupidity of pit road. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was not being smart because I don't know what. Like I said before, in some of the things we talked about was what an adrenaline rush. But yeah, I the first time we got ran over in Riverside out there, it was. We were on the wrong end of pit road. We should have been on the opposite end of pit road. I don't know whether that would have made a difference as far as might have been in that day, but it was kind of inevitable that it was going to happen. But then to get run over again in 1990 was the one that really was kind of, for me especially, the awakening of the fact that you always heard lightning don't usually strike the same place twice. Well, it does.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I've seen in racing is, and Warren can attest to this, the things that you think will never happen or you don't think you will ever see happen. In racing, it is the opposite end of the spectrum, because the things that I thought I'd never see, I usually always saw in racing. That thing, I was at Michigan, and I was standing on pit wall, and I was watching, I think it was Henley Gray, and Henley was out of Rome, and he was practicing at Michigan. Well, he spun out, and it was one of those long, lazy spins, and you think, well, he's just going to spin around, and he came down and hit only one of two openings in pit road. And it cut the car all the way up to where he was sitting, and the belts were bolted to the frame. Well, it split the frame and pulled him down so far in the seat that it crushed his pelvic bone. And I'm thinking, two openings in pit road, and he hits one of them. Okay, so at that point in time, I'm figuring, because people will come to me now and say, I want to do this, this, and this with the car. Me and Gary were talking about that this morning. And you tell them that, no, you don't need to do this. You need to do this, this, or this. And they say, well, I want to do it anyway. And I'll say, well, you need to find somebody else to do it, because I don't want to be involved in this. You try to help people understand that this stuff, you're going to get hurt. One of the worst people I've seen hurt, and this was out of a pure deal of, he was doing testing for Ford, and this was in the mid-'80s, and he had a big inch Mustang, and he broke an axle mid-track because the rear end axles weren't strong enough for the application. So he broke an axle mid-track. He was black and blue. He had the harnesses and the good seat and stuff, and had he not had that, he'd have probably got killed. But he broke an axle mid-track, and I've never seen anybody so black and blue. And Warren you've probably been in some things that you can talk to us about things that you thought you would never have happen that you've been through, that it's kind of like being in the dyno room and watching the motor run and pieces go everywhere. Well, pit road, no different, because the worst thing about pit road was leaving pit road. You never watched the car leave pit road because it picked up lug nuts on the racetrack and spun those lug nuts across you, so you never looked at that. And another thing that you had to be careful of as technology changed was before the U-joints got bigger, and they would actually, you drop the car and engine would rev up and shrapnel would go everywhere because it destroyed a U-joint, or it sheared the pinion off the front of the rear end because just the torque applied at the time. You couldn't stand it. So there's things you learn, and it's kind of like being on the launching pad there for Warren and being around the cars. I can't believe people stand there and do this, and even doing the burnouts and watching people do burnouts on the street and stuff, and they've obviously never seen the tires explode and take the quarter panels off and the things that happen. And I try to keep myself from those applications, from those situations, and you can't convince people. It's still, hey, y'all watch this.
Well, I want to, in our second episode, what I'd like to do is, you've talked about some of the safety things. I want to talk about some of the innovations that you did, all of it in engines and things like that. I'm hoping you guys can come back and do this again. Everybody good with that?
Absolutely, for me.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up for segment one. Episode one. Next week we'll do episode two and get into a little bit more of the history of racing and the costs and how they were and how they are now. and tube chassis cars, et cetera, as it evolved from the street cars to what we know now. I want to thank you all for your time, and we'll be back next week.